Okay. All right. Well, welcome to week 2, figures in the cityscape based on my trip to Italy. Um, as we said, we're going to do one of the cropped versions that we did from our studies of drawing from last week. I'm going to switch cameras, um, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Let me step back a second. Okay. So there's my singular line. I'm going to go ahead and just start my line drawing. So you may feel free to start working or sit back and watch. It's up to you. If you already have your line drawing done, perfect. You can just sit back and watch. I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. There is a little bit of an angle, so you can see my image might look a little bit off based on the camera angle. I used, see if I can get more of this in the camera's vision. The paper size I have, as you can see, I have a weird tape line here. It was one of those scrap pieces of paper. On the back, I have written 12 by 18-ish. So, and it was kind of crooked. So we'll just use what I have here. So it's a little bit larger, not quite. I think it's going to end up, and I kind of wanted it to end up based on the cropping to be somewhere around 11 by 14. I don't need it to be long and skinny because my image isn't long and skinny. I don't want it to conflict with what I have to work with. The shape of my image is not long and skinny. The shape of my image is closer to the feel of a 9 by 12 or an 8 by 10 or an 11 by 14. So I am working a little bit larger today. The image that I sent you guys, I'd sent you before. However, this one, I was working on straightening up the buildings at the edge that are off the camera right now. Interestingly, though, because this image was so cropped from my phone, there was a little bit of a distortion. So as I straightened the buildings in the foreground, the buildings in the background got crooked. So magic of cameras. Which it kind of makes sense. Again, it was from my phone and the image was really much larger and had a lot more information. So when we're getting down to the nitty gritty, really not a lot to, a lot of leeway on that. I also upped the contrast so I could get some good extra highlights on people, and I bumped up the color saturation. Just so some of the stuff wasn't so drab and we could pick out some of those reds and make the oranges a little bit brighter and the yellows a little bit brighter. So just a little bit of fun back there. So I'm going to start with the buildings first, kind of ignoring the people for just a minute. I eliminated almost all the buildings on the right-hand side, but not all of them. I'm just making a decision as to how big I want everything. I'm going to keep it like that. So this would be this almost the vanishing point, not quite. The bottom of the white part, which is actually, I think those are steps. So I'm going to fit all that information of that building right here. So I'll put a couple of hints of columns in there just so you kind of get your bearings as to where we are. I'm not going to go crazy because, again, most of this will be lost once we start painting. Regardless of if anything's crooked, I'm going to make all vertical lines straight because that's pretty much how everything was. It's just the distortion of the camera. If it should be straight, it will be straight. Using my skewer to get those extreme angles because regardless of size, those angles are what they are. Checking the angles of the awnings that go back because those also have, we want to make them a nice horizontal line, but they're not because of our height. So if we were standing directly in front of it at our eye side, at our eye line, it would be straight back into space. But we're short and that's tall, so it's going to go down. So that's when I just gently remind everyone, including myself, trust your skewer, not your brain. Trust what it says on that. Again, I'm also not concerned with counting windows and counting this and counting that. Well, I'll fit in some basic buildings. I couldn't tell you what street that is. I couldn't tell you. So it doesn't really matter. I just want to give the illusion that they are buildings. Lots of things happening. This side has a lot. It looks like maybe there's scaffolding in front of that building. I don't care. I'm not worried about it. It's just going to be some buildings and rooftops that go off into space. Because I do know I'm going to have an edge. I can't get too fussy and messy. I'm just using a 4H pencil, which I was thinking this morning. It's really sad how the one thing I can never find is a pencil. Out of all the things, I need to actually go buy a pencil. It seems silly. Like that should be the one thing I have. But I don't. Looks like some kind of an awning there. I'll just kind of place it. Not really worried.
Every time when I draw, I end up erasing it with my arm. I don't have
yeah. Well, are you talking about erasing it on your pastel paper or just in general
on my paper? Pastel paper? It's just, yeah.
So I've learned, and this holds true when I'm actually using pastel, but when I put my pinky down just as a place. So my pinky, I have a little bit of glue on it from something, but my pinky will keep the entire hand away from it. So
that's my secret.
And it helps steady. So the whole point of having your hand down is to help steady your hand, but this helps keep your hand steady without your whole hand down too. Like a built-in maul stick, you know?
Right.
The Saturday class at Pine Shores is a charcoal drawing class, which I love teaching, as most of you know. And there's a new woman, sweetest lady, but I kept looking in her whole, and she was doing the same thing. Her whole hand was covered and she would have to redo bits and pieces of her right hand side of the paper because she was going, it takes practice. It's uncomfortable sometimes. It's almost a little scary to just let your hand not touch the paper. So I'm just kind of making some decisions. My paper, the size that I've made everything isn't quite the same. So I've lost a little bit of roofing. So I'm just deciding how many buildings I'm putting in. Again, so I'm looking at these two larger fronts are about the same size. But maybe not necessarily for me, because I want to get all my people in there. So maybe this one can be a little skinnier. As it goes back into space, we do have it kind of, it's almost even. So I put that line so I know that this is what's going back in space. I'm not going to worry about drawing in all those individual bricks. What I will do, though, is place a little bit of this little balcony here. Because I'm changing proportions a little bit of the buildings, I have to be careful with how large I make that balcony because it does have a relation to the people down below, right? So this whole guy might need to be moved up. Let me take a look at that now before I get too far. So what I'm going to do is see how big the bulky part of the balcony is and compare it to, we like this guy. So it's 1, 2, 3 of this guy. So if I see here, he's about right here. 1, 2, it's going to be tight. I'm going to move it up just a touch. Just so it's a little bit more believable. So I'll move up my little brick line. Brick line can go a little higher to the top. And then this balcony can come up just a touch. Angles again, that feels a little wonky. That's good. Okay. So there's going to be a lot of stuff to get into this one little painting. I'm still going to try and keep it, we can always add details on our own, but we want to get the bulk of it in there, and we want to get the bulk of it visually correct, meaning proportionately, the overall feel. All right, so the fronts of these, so this is what's, you can't see that, hold on. You know what I'm talking about. As I begin to draw and place all of this whole corner column here, this is what's important. It's same thing as the windows and such. You can watch, and we did this on Cityscapes. The lines are crooked, 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 and then they get straighter with our line of vision. So when you take your skewer, it's not a formula of just going line, 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 line. It's slant, 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 less, 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 less. Again, based on our point, our focal point. So these lines coincide with that. So don't just get into a quick, oh, here we go, line, line, line. The side that's facing us is just nice little straight lines, but the front that matches the windows goes with our focal point. I haven't even brought in the focal point just yet. I've only been working on vertical lines so far. Nothing horizontal. All right, letting the dog out. All right, sharpening my pencil. Of course, amazing how quickly that sanded paper eats up your pencil. Okay. So I really like some of the people that are going to live down here. I could take away some of the tape. I think I might do that. There's some interesting people that are hanging out right here. If I leave my edge tape, I'm going to lose a lot of them. So I'm going to change that a little bit. I'll just move it down. Whatever I get, I get. Okay. I'm just going to hold my paper for a minute or two, and then I'll post it somewhere. Hopefully you guys can see it. Okay, so this will be those front bricks, nice and skinny, even though they're really fat. And make it back. And then starts a whole nother little column over here. this will be one of those columns where you can make up your mind as to whether you want to bother with doing all the bricks in there. I'm not doing the lines just yet. And the reason is, again, I still haven't really brought in the whole idea of the focal point and the perspective that comes all the way into here. I don't want to get caught up in the detail of counting bricks just yet. What I will start to do though, I'm going to place this here for a second. I'm going to take working on the focal point with these front buildings here. I'm going to start to place the lines of the trim for all the windows. So again, as we were talking last week, the focal point is somewhere right above this guy's head right here. Okay. So we're going to start to get that information in. I am very loosely using my skewer as a straight edge, knowing that there are imperfections in the skewer. And especially if you hold it too tightly, it will bend a little. So you have to be super gentle. My lines are super light. I'm not going to do the whole sidewalk down because we have groups of people in there. So I'm not worried about that just yet. Yeah. All right. Things to consider, what's running through my head right now is before I don't want to get too caught up in the buildings and then lose sight of how the people are going to look, right? So as we talked about last week, the majority, with the exception of this really short woman, most people's heads go right across this line. So if I set my skewer and go horizontally with the way people go back in space, their heads are really going to be close to, like, this guy's really tall and this lady's really short. That happens in the foreground, but in the background, everybody's head kind of lines up with that. So I need to reference that so I don't lose sight of my focal point. So I'm going to take that. This is my focal point. Boom. If that's my focal point, I can take a line, basically go straight across, and then the people will be built out of that. And that might be up a little, down a little, based on their height, based on their groupings, based on their placement. But now I can kind of have an idea that all my people are going to be from this line down. And so when I'm placing all the information about my building, now I can say, all right, well, if the people, their heads are here, now I can look at this line where all these windows are, and these windows and these windows and all that kind of good stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. I did move this guy around. I'm going to take a quick look and see just how off he is. Oh, he's actually a little low. He needs to go higher. Which I can just make him a little smaller. But right now, that's good. Okay. Oh, that's a giant column. Oh, this is the one where we were talking about the street was curved a little bit. So this building in particular doesn't follow the same focal point. These two, because the street curb just a touch. So that kind of changes things. So just use your skewer to get those angles for a minute and don't worry necessarily about focal point. Let's see. I have a tendency to leave more room than necessary. So with just getting these lines in there without going through the tediousness of measuring, I get myself in a little bit of trouble. But again, once we start painting, I'm really just going to be focused on light and dark. Light and dark, light and dark, giving little impressions of what's supposed to be there. All of these little, um, maybe the flags, but all of these little bits of awnings and light fixtures and things like that, I'm ignoring. I will paint those in or draw those in when it's time, when we get a little more information in pastel down. I'm not going to waste my penciling time for right now because I will lose all of that anyway. So this guy is still not on the focal point either. That okay. So now this building with the red flags, this building goes back into our focal point. So that's nice. That's another checks and balances that we can get. So I can keep my skewer where it's at. I know there's a lot of ornate detail hanging out, but again, just gonna kind of ignore it for a little bit. Definitely shutters that are open and kinds of stuff. Although for me, it is a little important to get some of these lines that go around the bend connected. So you can see trim and then it connects to the front, the little brick, and then it connects to the front. So I'm on this yellow building that's right down the center with that. I'm gonna leave that be. I'm starting to look at, all these little balconies. They have all these little ornate cornices and corbels and whatever. So I'm just gonna leave that be. Pretend it's a flat cityscape for a minute. So I'm gonna get to the painting today, right? The fun part. Color. Okay. All right, so this in between, I scrunched up a little bit. And I scrunched it up probably based on, again, I didn't measure. I wasn't really that concerned. I made this building as big as I did at the focal point, and then I built off of there. So by the time I got to here, if I was really fussy, I would go back and fix it. But I'm not fussy because I don't really care about what the building itself is. It doesn't, in my mind, it doesn't make a difference. So if in your mind it does make a difference, fix it. I know it's really one of those things that people either can handle or they can't. They have to, keep it exactly like the photo is. Otherwise, their brain kind of twitches. So do what makes sense for you. So looks like there's 5 windows. I'm making them 3. I'm making them a little bit larger. That's okay. Let's get this other row in here. We can make this one a little smaller because it's balcony. And again, I know I'm going to lose a lot of this information once we get painting. So I'm not too terribly concerned about it. So this is just going to be a generic line that I'm going to base my windows off of. Once I start painting. And this one, there's going to be some trim that comes off of the balcony. Putting in a little bit of effort to line up the windows. A little bit. Okay. So this little side trim, or the front trim. So it does go in line with a couple of things. So with these windows, there is one line that lines up with that. These little bricks are lining up. So that's pretty important. Get a couple of them built. I'll work on the spacing with the shadows and such, but for right now, it's pretty good. We're going to get into some people down here. And again, I don't even know. I mean, my paper, I might be chopping off about right there. So, worst, well, I guess fullest case scenario, this will be my end line anyway. It might be closer in. All right. Whew. It's a lot of simple lines. The word simple. I should know to take that out of my vocabulary. It's like just a simple, quick home improvement project.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's time for people. People. I'm gonna put this over here again. I'm going to focus on all those distant people for a second because most of them behave as one unit. We talked about last week treating them like a clump of trees where we're going to put in sky holes. In this case, it'll be putting in street holes because we see street through their legs, right? You see buildings through their heads, so in between their heads and such. But for the most part, they act as one unit. Especially on this side, we have this lovely little diagonal. It's not quite off the center line, but we can just kind of place it just very, very lightly. So we know where all these folks' feet end. I'm not going to put this front guy in here. I'm going to put the guy on the bicycle. That's about it. So just a really light line I have going here. I just kind of want to start to, so if that's the focal point, this is their line that I established before. I'm just going to kind of clump them without drawing individual people, right? So that's the challenge. How do you get your brain to not draw legs and feet, right? It'll probably be easier once we get some color going because we can just put in blocks of color. So I've just kind of taken my finger and used the graphite that's on the paper and just kind of pulled into that little bit of chunk as to how the people are going to live. I don't want to go too far into the drawing of them right now. I'm just going to kind of sketch like ghost-like figures along the way here. It's so good I have that line because I literally put my little scribbles for the bicycle guy. I started him too far down because I was like, oh no, he's coming forward. Anyway. So I'm just kind of placing this guy, right? So the middle of him hits basically where the balcony is. And his head is a little bit above. But based on how I have I did make those buildings a little too big. I'm going to put him over here. So I can get all the other people in. So let me move him. And I'm going to put him a little bit above that line because I think his head's a little bit bigger. Again, I'm just going to kind of shimmy some lines in here. Let's see. If I end the bicycle there, he's going to come. Okay. He felt like he was getting a little too big. So what I just did was I took an angle from the bottom of the bicycle to his foot and I made a mark. And then I was like, that looks really big. So then I measured him, his whole body based on his relationship to that little balcony there. So if I did that, it's actually a little small, which is kind of funny. So I'll keep him a little bit smaller because he's further away technically. I'm not worried about his overall shape just yet. They're going to be squiggle people for a minute, just so I can get them in there and place them. The gestures of the humans, like how we can see some of their feet move and everything else, that's going to be with pastel. All right, so who do I want to put in, right? That's the next kind of question. I need to decide who all is going to be there. So this guy in the suit is always a good guy, right? Because he's got the suit on and the blue shirt. So let me take his head to his head. And I do remember he was a bit taller than everybody. So if I place him about right here, he's got quite the slant in the shoulders. So think about last week. We've got the shoulders and his hips look like they're coming a little bit like that. And in relationship to that guy, you know, it actually kind of works. So his hips are right at this guy's waist. Right? So that guy's waist is about right there. So that works. The only thing I can't tell, it looks like he's carrying something in his arm. I'll deal with that later. It could be he's carrying something, or it could be this guy's shirt. This is the challenge of blowing up a photograph, right? He does have a package, a nice red bag. So that's going to be a fun pop of color when we get to it. See where their feet meet. Now I made his legs too long. Or that guy too. Oh, I did make that guy a little smaller. So if I go hip to head, so hip to head, yeah, his feet should be down here. Good. So because I'm a little bit closer, is why I'm getting a little more detailed as we go. You don't have to go too crazy on details with your people, but I do want some shapes, right? I do want some overall shapes to work on. We'll get there. This guy with the hat has a lovely flexion. This is where my automatic drawing urge to make everything much bigger than it is always a problem. So I have to look at the relationship. I wanted his head to get bigger, but his head, there's an angle. I can see how much, not necessarily, he's probably shorter, but it's more about the distance. I gave him quite the muscular leg there. Look at that. All right, and then I'm gonna place a few of these people, and then we'll start painting. I don't even know what time it is. What time is it? Yeah. Oh, it's not even 10. Okay. This process is feeling like it's taking quite a while. I don't know about you guys.
This is a very complicated thing.
Yeah, it is. Gonna sharpen my pencil again. Now, of this little clump of people, I'm gonna decide which ones are the most I don't know, interesting or purposeful for my painting. This guy's got his little satchel over his shoulder. He's walking through and give him a little more definition. The background people can stay squiggles. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people there. She's got a bright red bag. I like that because it just adds to the whole idea that most of these people are shopping. I mean, she's got a big white bag. She's in a lot of shadow. So I like the red bag. I like the positioning of her because she's facing the other direction. She's got a little light here on her tush and on her shoulder. This lady's shirt is nice and bright. I might cut. Well, that lady has a All right, I'm just gonna start with the lady with the bag and then look at it again, right? Okay, so I'm gonna get an angle from his head, the tall guy's head, down to her head. Let's see where that falls, where she places, because she places right in front of this whole column here. So I know I'm going to place her about right here. I just want to see if that's, ooh, and it works. Let me do that again, just in case. His head to her head. I can make her a little bit shorter. Let me just double check, triple check. Yeah, I'll make her just a skosh shorter. Her shoulders have a nice angle that are going way high. Again, she's holding bags. This is just the shoulder line. That's not an actual shadow or, her line. Actually, that's too high. Hold on. Except that's the top of her head. Looks like a little ghost. That's top of her head. And her shoulders are going down like that. Her midline. His hips are kind of going forward. Let me see the feet. Tall guy's feet to her feet have an angle. I bounced. Hold on. So her feet are going to come down here. So I've made her all too small. Make her head a little bit bigger. Oh, that's her face. See, that's just, again, making these, zooming in, you're losing a lot of crispness in the detail. You're still getting a lot of information, but it's just a little bit. You have to take a second look a few times. All right, so there's her shirt. And what I did was there, and similarly to our drawings last week, her shirt line happens to be her midpoint. The bottom of her white shirt is even. The space from the top of her head to the bottom of her shirt is the same as the bottom of the shirt to the bottom of her feet. It just happens to be that way. And that's one of those things, again, observation. That's observation of just general things. You don't even have to know what you're looking at to know that that line is equal distance from that line, which is equal distance from that line. Those are the types of things that are important to us. And then she's got another bag on her shoulder. So she's kind of fun. She looks a little awkward right now, but I think once I get color on her, it'll be fine. This lady is like scratching her back, so her hand is wrapped up into her back. So if I put her, I will not be putting her hand on the small of her back because that will look weird. This guy is mostly in shadow and he's on the phone. So I'm going to leave space for him, but I don't know if I'm going to draw him. He could be one of those afterthoughts because he's so simply in dark. He's got the shine on his head and the shine on his hand, but his shirt is literally one mark. His jeans are two marks, a darker blue and a lighter blue. There's not really a whole lot in there. Not necessary to draw once we get the other people in. So I'll just leave room for him. And I can add him if I feel like it later. So tall guy to girl with the white bag. There's an angle for her head. So if I leave room for that guy, she'll be about right there. So this is really going to start to determine how many people I can fit between girl with the red bag and girl with the white bag. I'm obviously not going to get 4 full people in between the two of them. So I can decide who I put and who I don't. So tall guy head, white bag girl head, that line. So let me get their feet angle. Yeah, her feet is getting, we're getting close to running off the paper. So I don't want to get too close to the edge. Oh, she's got this nice little specific shape going here, where her legs almost come up as in a V because of the way she's standing. Perfect. Let's see. So that's her head. She's got a nice little like bun, it looks like, in her hair. The shoulders are rounded, but there's still a line. There's still an angle from shoulder blade to shoulder blade. You can start to use to your advantage. I made her extra chunky. What is with me in drawing the girls bigger and the guys busts? All right, let me fix her.
It's personal preference.
Right?
Yeah, when I look at people, I see them bigger, rounder, because
Yeah,
it's what pleases me.
I agree. Because, I always said there was a couple of times I did life drawing and they had this man, an older gentleman, who was super, super skinny. And he had, zero muscle. I mean, just zero, like just nothing left. He was, I don't know, but I would take a really plump woman any day and have some character than just literally a bag of skin and bones. I want the character. I love having some kind of a character to draw. It doesn't have to be super strong and muscly. Just it has to be something, some character. Um, and that gentleman probably would have been fine had he been clothed, because then the clothing would have draped off of him in an interesting way. But without clothes, there wasn't much interest.
What I always found about thin men,
Yeah.
not much interest without the clothes.
I always joked, I said I would never date or marry a man whose jeans I couldn't fit in. You can't have skinnier jeans than they. It's the last thing I need to worry about.
Well, I'm 76, so I don't really worry about it either.
Okay. So this guy in the white shirt is hidden behind this lady who's looks like she's arm in arm with the white bag girl. Um, she's got a nice little head of blonde hair. So I'm torn between this lady with the blonde hair and then this lady with the white shirt. Now the lady with the white shirt, you can't see any of her face and she's clearly facing us. Um, so that could be a challenge for someone who is so close up in our painting. Right now we have a lot of backs of heads except for these two guys. Everybody else, it's the back of them. So I think I'm going to stay consistent. I can show that her arm is wrapped around her there. And I'll go ahead and choose this one. And their feet are just about even, except this lady is just a little bit shorter in general. made her kind of look like a little kid. All right, it doesn't matter because I don't know these people. So it could be whatever they need to be. All right, so she's up on the sidewalk. Gonna adjust the position of my sidewalk. And now I can bring this building all the way down because I'm just not gonna put people in there all the way. It's not really a straight line at all, is it? Okay. I still have time to, think about and add more people, even though I just kind of finished off that building there. I still have, whatever. There is a nice little strip of light that comes on top of this little piece there. I may or may not include that. Okay, so I'm gonna pause the video for a second. If I can see through the sun. All right. So here we go. Now it's time to paint. I don't think it was a very overcast day. Everything seemed to be bright and sunny when we were there. Except one day. But so I'm gonna make my sky a little bluer. It's just kind of blown out back there. But by adding a little more blue, we can add a little more character to our street in the foreground. I'm gonna retape up my picture here. Reference photo. So it'll probably be taped. You probably won't be able to see the whole screen, or the whole image. But at this point, being able to see the reference photo isn't that big of a deal. It's more about those lines in the beginning, but now we have those set. I'm just getting my gloves in a bottle. And so now we're going back to basics here. It's what comes first, and what comes first is always what's furthest away. So I will be starting with my sky, building up from the background. Once we get closer to the foreground, there's going to be, just like our tree lines with our people, there's going to be some back and forth between creating the street, creating the people, putting a little bit of street between the legs, pulling legs down into the street, that kind of a thing. We don't have to make it as crowded, but in the distance, it will help us to have it a little more crowded because they can live as one kind of little blob with just highlights of hats and hair color and things like that on there. Okay. So blue, blue, blue. It is, the sun looks like it's at the highest part of the day based on the shadows of the people. So it doesn't have to be crazy bright blue sky. All right, the sunlight that's coming in is really skewing my vision right now. So I'm gonna you'll see my head, sorry.
The clock said it's either 1 o'clock or 5 after 12. I can't tell. So it is at the highest point of the day.
Yeah. All right. So this is a little more on the turquoise side. I'll add some regular blue to it as well. I'm just placing it. I'm not worried about cloud work today, or anything like that. I am going to keep that stick a little bit handy though, because I could use it in reflections, right? You could also change, like, for instance, it's a little bit darker than I wanted. I mean, you could change this whole scene to be like an overcast day, right? Because everything is pretty settled but then you would lose strong shadow shapes at the feet. Everyone has a strong shadow on their feet. I just didn't put it in there yet. All these people with their strong little highlights of color on their foreheads and hats and shoulders, we wouldn't have that either. So I'm keeping it a nice bright blue sky day. And then again, punching up the blue from the photograph so that I have the chance to use it in the street. Because, you know, asphalt is boring. Cement is boring. So let's start with that building in the background. Again, it looked important. I don't know what it was. I'm not really that worried about it. So I'm going to look in some of my gray families and blue families and just hint at the columns that were there. So, you know, as I paint cityscapes, there's always a lot of detail in cities, and it's really easy to get lost in all of those details. So I try to simplify it. I try to just keep with basic shapes. I'm not working large enough, in my opinion, to have every little detail. Um, I'm working large enough to get a lot of information in, just not every little ounce of information in. And again, you'll see all sorts of information that you're like, oh, I can tell that that's, you know, cornices and stairs and this and that. No, you might be able to tell that that's what that is, but it's going to drive you insane to try and make it what that is. This is a little bit of a gray blue that I picked, just to get a little bit of, there's a lot of shadowy things happening there in the front of that building. So I just put that in place so that when I put something lighter over the top of it, it's not dull and flat. It's a way to kind of cheat doing all the little shadow shapes that are back there. This is a nice gray. Gonna start with, that is not nearly as light as it looked like it was gonna be. Boo. All right, let me try again. It's a little lighter. So I'm using marks that maybe are a little indicative of a hint of stairs, a hint of highlights. I am using not necessarily the whole flat, but you know, the front corner of things. Even that up, and I'm taking the side and just I don't need perfectly formed columns. I just need a good hint, right? So this is still kind of a mid-tone, not quite a white. I still have room to go a little bit brighter, but I have a good shape forming. You can tell it's a building with columns back there. So let me take a look at some of my true lights, which I can go into the bright, 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 light blue family, based on everything else that we're doing. Let me see if it's a light enough. Well, it's a good addition, but it's not light enough. course, I've got the bright sun shining directly on it, so everything looks light enough. There we go. So we're just kind of, I've used what, 3, 4 colors already, and I'm just doing it so that we have, a little light, a little shadow, a little form. My lines aren't nearly as straight as they should be, or as even as they should be. But this little building back here isn't the star of the show, right? We've got that all kinds of other information that's going to be a little bit more prominent than this background building. Okay. I'm pretty happy with that building. There's not much I need to worry about. I don't want it to be flat. I do know that, meaning if I make everything too terribly even, it's going to read as flat. So there is like a nice variation in the shadow shapes in between the columns. So I'm brightening up where the light can get in. So it looks a little blue in there because it kind of does. All right. That looks like it's got some kind of like a copper thing happening on top of the roof. Which I think it is a statue of some sort of man on a horse. But I don't know for sure. So it can kind of live like that. All right. Furthest 2 points. Check. Now comes all the hard part. Now comes all kinds of detail, right? I'm still going to focus on the buildings for a few more minutes because I have time, because they are a little bit further back. Some of these people in the background live simultaneously with the buildings, but I just want to start marking how the colors are going to go. So take a minute. If you haven't already, make sure you have your scrap paper handy. It's very beigey and stuff in the background there. And beige can get a little boring. So push into the goldeny yellows. I'm saving my oranges for up close. But back here, this is a nice golden yellowy next to it. But as you get further away, it's as nice. They're nice beigey buildings, but think about it. You could add some pink to it. You could add any kind of a slight variation on beige. You can add a little bit of lavender to it. You don't want to go too crazy because then you take yourself out of Rome. Everything, it's very earthy based on the pigments that they had available to them centuries ago. So the oranges and the yellows and the beiges, that's what was available naturally for all that stucco. I did ask that question because everything, some reds, and I'm like, why is everything's the same color scheme wherever you went. And they had those colors down in Pompeii. And Pompeii, Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. So they had those colors back then, and those colors were still on the walls today, which is amazing. Oh, I tell you what, somebody was saying they were so excited that I was going to Pompeii, and I was like, okay. But now that I've been there, I'm like, I get it. It is so, the history in taking the tour and just learning about how amazingly developed their city was for being 79 AD. And who knows how long it was in place before it got destroyed. Like well, I'm sure they told me, I just don't remember. But um, you know, the systems they had in place for no electricity and no anything is just mind blowing. But anyway, I digress. So I know for myself, my beiges can sometimes be too mustardy, or they can be too um goldeny kind of a thing. I'm gonna go kind of drab back here because I know I'm also going to be putting in some of those darker um bits and pieces that represent the the shutters and stuff that are back here. So the body of the buildings is what I'm going to focus on first. I'm not going to go heavy in my mark making because I want the tooth to be there when I go and lightly touch the corner to create little the little decorative, I don't know the word, like the decorative, the lines, the little ledges that come out. Um, so this is a nice little beige I use in sand a lot, which is to work nicely in this situation. And another reason that I don't want it to be too heavy um, is because I'm going to start to, at some point we're going to start to put people's heads and things. So we've got all kinds of information. Too much of this color is a bad thing, so I have to remember that. It happens to me every time. But I'm just kind of going with the flow of the buildings. They're not nearly this dark back here, right? But it's a good base to mix with the next color. I'm not going to bother to blend it in just yet. I like to wait and see if I need to blend when it comes to cityscapes. I would rather uh, get a layers of mark making to make what I need, um, if I can, right? I just picked up a same value, but more towards a gray, like a taupey gray, not as rich of a color. Again, just following the lines, but not tightly. I don't need any sharp lines, but I don't want to get too out of hand and lose my angles and lose my drawing. So actually, this is going to be a pretty good base color for these. Brickies. I'm adding the color like that because I don't want to lose my lines just yet. And I know that there's going to be, some shadow shapes in there. But what I kind of like to do in these scenarios where the buildings have so much similarities in their colors, I just want to use one color as long as I can before I switch to the next. That way, too, there's some unity. We kind of unify all these different colors coming together. Does anybody have any questions so far with the process or with any problems that they need resolving? Because again, don't forget, you can always email me. I haven't checked email since I've been on. Nobody mentioned anything. Okay. Okay. Let's see. And again, we talk about, we haven't mentioned it this time around, but I did mention back to basics. We start from the back and work our way forward. I am grabbing colors that are a little darker than what the top color is going to be. So when I just picked up this kind of goldeny yellow, there's going to be brighter spots on top of it. So this isn't my top color. I do want that opportunity to make things a little brighter as we go up. Looking at the sunlight here, there's more sun on the top of the building than the bottom. And again with the test colors, because of the test strip, because it is really easy to get into, that's almost the exact same, the wrong family of beige, the wrong family of yellow. Kind of like when you're trying to paint a blonde woman or child. You think you've got blonde in your hand and you've really got skin tone. It's not even close to being what you needed. That happens a lot to me. I have to really look at my colors. This color is almost the color of the paper, so it's not showing up very well, but there's like a nice bright column that sits there. This side of the street, it looks like on the right side, it looks like things have more of a gray. So you can, this is where, this is a nice blue gray, but this is where I can sneak in a little bit of lavender, right? When I do some of that detail to start to represent the variety of awnings and overhangs, and I do try to use just the corners, the edges, without drawing a line, just hinting at a line. I don't want something like some stiff line in there. Just want a nice representation of, let your imagination do the rest. So I do have to also remember, because I'm trying to look for something a little bit lighter to give me the information I need. The right side of the street, as we recall, this is why I chose the left side of the street. The right side of the street doesn't have much in terms of bright lights. So, as I'm grabbing highlight colors, I need to make sure that I remember that it's not all that bright over there. So I don't necessarily need bright. I just need a contrast. And one of those things that I'm sure is true in oils, and acrylics, as it is in pasteling, our quick response to pick up a gray. Sometimes we kind of have to resist that urge because picking up a gray can completely dull down and change your painting to ick real fast. So I do pick up varieties of purples and blues first, and then see if I can make it work from there. So I'm just hinting at on the whole right side, hinting at, okay, well, there's some awnings that stick out, and there's some shadow shapes, and there's some, I don't know, just a variety of things that leave it up to your imagination as to what it could be representing. When we get closer to the end, I will certainly either take a picture to send to you guys that has more information, or zoom in a little bit closer so you guys can see. I'm kind of liking how simplified the right side is, but there's so much more work to be done, and we have about an hour left. So I'm just going to keep going and working my way around until we get to closer to the street. I actually might, that's really dark. It's going to kind of mark a little bit. Of the body of the streets. Not really touching anyone, just filling in a little bit of space. I'm using kind of not quite a light lavender, just a nice medium lavender that looks a little on the gray side, obviously for purposes of it being asphalt. Trying not to lose the people that I have placed. All right. Put that there. I'm going to step back and you can see things from a distance. If you haven't done that, I know we haven't been working that terribly long, but if you haven't stepped back, step back. I do want to get information at least built around the people so that we can get to painting the people, but I don't want to rush it, so I'm still going to keep building on out, and we'll just keep playing it by ear. So in order of events, furthest away to the front, so I'm building, unintended, I'm building the buildings because the people are all in front of the buildings. All right, the street, it is also, the people are in front of the street. So this whole section of building and street is technically behind all of the people. So that's why we're working on all the building at this point next. Now within the building itself, we have the flatness of the facade, and then we have all the details that come in on top of it. So again, simplifying all those details. I'm not really concerned about every little window shade and everything else, but we'll try to get them all slightly represented at least. I am using a really light touch to all of this because A, I want to keep my tooth and see my lines, but B, it adds some of that texture that we don't have to manually put in, right? Because all of the most of them are stucco or something like that. So we don't need to worry about adding a texture. I am going to start to place some of these shutters. Most of the shutters were just a nice, deep, rich wood, dark brown. So I'm just going to kind of place it in the general shape. Like this balcony looks like it's, I don't know, it's probably the lighter stucco, but it's really shadowed, so I can add a little bit of darkness to that too. There is, let's see, up here. The flags are in between, so I'll leave that space. And all of this looks, for a while, just like with any painting, it looks a little childlike or it looks a little like too in your face. So just inch by inch, let yourself get through it. I don't want to get too crazy with contrast. Um, Especially the further off into the distance. It's just like with a landscape. If you have too much contrast and too much crispness in those dark details, then it changes how far away you are. You don't necessarily want that. Let's see. I'm looking at browns. Browns are always tricky, right? You don't want them to be too orange. You don't want them to be too yellow or too dark. I'm looking at for in here because the orange is going to sit on top of it. So the brown needs to have a little bit of orange, but not too much. This is a little bit of red. We'll see. I did kind of ignore on the photograph. It looks like there's like a little pop out on this building front right in here. I did kind of ignore it, but I'm gonna take it as a shadow, kind of a coloring. All right, on screen, this is gonna look not any different than what I have, but it's got a little bit of a red feel to it. It's like shadows coming from the windows and so this is going to be pretty once we start to add the pops of orange. It's really going to sparkle. Right up to the heads, I'm being very careful. I don't want to interrupt people. Little hints of some of that shadow. The dimensional bits of the brick there. Again, it's going to look pretty rudimentary for a while. This is a pretty dark, kind of a charcoal kind of color. I'm just starting to hint at where the actual windows are because they're nice and in shadow on the inside. So on screen, it's a little bit difficult to tell the difference between the colors based on the value. But I have this brown actually doesn't even look like brown anymore compared to that brown. So I'll be adding, so this brown that I had in my hand for the shutters, now that it's next to this red brown, this looks gray brown. So I'm gonna have to update that to get it to be a nicer color for those shutters. This is great. This red brown is gonna be great when I start to add the orange next to it. And then just a little hint of extra dark that I'll be adding some other colors on top of, like maybe some deeper blues to represent the windows. How's everybody doing? Yeah, okay. Plugging along, right?
Put a really terrible color on the one side and it kept pulling my eye.
Oh, yeah.
So I erased it. I feel much better
Okay.
now.
Oh, good. That happens, one wrong color
Oh my
could
God.
send the painting into despair.
Sends my soul into despair. It's like,
It is funny though too. Like I really don't like painting with brown, and these paintings, all of Italy, there's a lot of brown, and I've been trying to work with that and change that in some ways. Um, I don't know, figure it all out as I go, I guess. I'm adding a different brown on top of for these shutters. I guess the two together work a little bit better. I will be brightening them up. That's the other thing I do find, that I struggled with the painting, the Venice painting. Um, and it's a problem from working from photograph is making things a little too dark and contrasty. Um, to just bring them to lighten up just a little bit because, you know, in person they're just not so contrasty. Yeah, you really can't. The color that I'm using right now is much more vibrant than it's appearing on screen. I almost have to look away from the screen. It's not pleasant. I literally just picked up like a nice pumpkin-y kind of an orange. That's not going to be the color that's on top, but it's just going to kind of give a little more vibrancy and then I can tone it down. Um, but just like that whole concept of painting what's a little bit darker underneath and then bringing it into the light, that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
it's actually a very nice color. I like it.
Much better on screen. I do like it though. It is funny how everything is just a little bit different when it's on the screen versus when it's in person. I've still been pretty light to the touch. I do know that I will be making stronger marks soon. But for right now, I'm still keeping it pretty gentle. Oh, that's a nice color. I mean, overall, I'm not the type of person that likes to see too much tooth. I like to see just the color. But I'm also a little more aware as time goes on of what too much blending will do too soon. Sometimes it's super helpful and sometimes it's not. But if I know now that if I do it too soon, I can't undo it. So I wait, which can be really hard. Okay, that's a terrible stick. It can be really hard. You kind of like this color. It's a nice peachy kind of color. So then I kind of start to add little details here and there of like the little window sills, just to start to break up the darkness of those windows that I have. So now if I go back in and just start to get those little window sills. And again, I'm not being super careful with, you know, they're just hints of it. I'm not doing exactness here. This is a nice beigey color, which I can punch up with my lavender. Can punch up with some reflective orangey colors because I can see a little bit of that on there. So now that I've just blocked in, now it's time to add, I can add the shadows and things like that. This building is close enough to us that I can have a little more detail on this building. I don't want to go crazy because I don't want it to take away from the focus of the people down below, but it needs to look right. I'm just kind of standing back and assessing for just a minute. Deciding where to go next. See, there's some nice bright. Let's see how much brighter this is. Ah, not much brighter, but it's a nice little addition too. It's a little purpley, but that can be reflective from kind of across the street a little bit. Let's see. And two, if you are the type of person that likes to be a little tighter in your painting and a little more specific, that's not terrible. I know a lot of people ask about loosening up, but being tight in your painting and your depictions of things isn't a bad thing. So I don't, I hope that if that's what your heart is saying, that's what you're doing. Nobody has to do anything one particular way.
Good, because my heart says the exact opposite. These details drive me crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've always kind of not liked very much is the whole, you must do it this one way,
I
otherwise
know. That's
yeah,
why I
like
like you as a teacher. You're very free, with letting people be who they are. Because
that's what
some
it's all
just
about for me. I want people to just
enjoy
explore
it.
and have fun. Yeah, enjoy
Right.
it. And even on the days that we struggle, it's still better than not doing it.
Yes, right.
And I feel like I'm still,
I mean, that
you
we had
know,
an instructor in watercolor, which I'll never have again. Um, and she wanted you to use the exact same color that she had.
oh
No matter,
gosh.
yeah, I mean, who has colors? I don't know about you, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I
she
get,
was she
when
was like a nut. She was just terrible, just terrible.
yeah,
I
I've
like the good
got,
stuff.
I've done stuff where, you have the same palette when you do oils, and I get that, but I'm still mixing it differently. You know what I mean? Like I'm not getting,
Right.
which I do
And
want to start.
she had one person she picked on every class, at
Aw.
least. I know, it was terrible. I won't do it again. But a lot of people feel that way too.
Uh,
I'll tell you who was a sweetheart was Sue. I don't think she's even doing it anymore. But
oh yeah.
yeah,
I love
she was
Sue.
kind,
Yeah, she's just such a nice. I mean, I love her.
She is,
I
that's it.
can't imagine her being anything but kind.
No, she was kind. She was very, very good.
Good,
That other one, if it had been your first class, you would have quit the whole thing. So, oh, art's not for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's not good. We can't
No,
have
she was
that.
all. It was good, actually. Really nice. I went, it's a little tedious. Something like happy ones. But, it's like the whole thing. And then they gave us a box along with a half a wrap it. Nothing. I know. They really got cheaper.
Okay. So apparently I started to just get like really focused on all the orange. It looks really streaky online. I kind of like the way it looks in person, but there's so much going on. Um, we only have a little bit more than a half hour left. Um, so again, start to think about if we want to finish this together, um, or if we want to work on our own. I kind of want to finish it together because we haven't even touched the people yet. I don't really know how far we're going to get. And I'd like to do the people with you guys, if that's okay.
That sounds good to me.
Okay. Everybody else? I think I see.
Anybody?
Yep. Okay.
That's a good idea.
Okay. All right. So let's really take our time over the next half hour. I'm going to keep focusing on the buildings. I want to get, because I really focused on the orange. I like the way that looks in person more than on camera, which is funny because I always have a hard time taking good photographs of sunsets and sunrises that have the nice oranges and yellows in them. So I think there's just something with the reflection of the light against all the color. So I'm just gonna keep working on some of this information in here. And this is definitely, especially as we get a little bit into the distant buildings, get your pencil back out. You can still put in some lines, like reinforce some of them and use it as just like a gentle hint of the building. I mean, try not to be too over the top because now then you'll have pencil lines, but you can kind of see on camera, this is already starting to really kind of form nicely with just a couple of sketchy lines. So don't go too heavy.
Gotta eat them.
I have learned my lesson on that. If I go too heavy, then it's
I feed them.
pencil lines on a painting. But this in combination, and then you can add highlights on top of it, but it just is another helpful tool. It is hard to get some of those details in there that we really want to get in there. Some of these columns in the background here, I can just put them back in. They might get covered back up, but at least they can get back in there and I can pop in highlights around it. And again, I said this last week, I had a hard time with the Venice painting, just really kind of ignoring some of the dinge and stuff that you can see all over the buildings in Rome. So this is a kind of a way to, there's a little dinge, but it can be represented with graphite instead. I'll definitely continue that technique for a little bit here and identifying some of the windows and some of the ledges and such. And make sure your pencil's sharp because otherwise you're just scratching. Okay. Oh, just ate my pencil. Okay. The pencil sharpener says don't use pencil anymore. Probably just ate the tip. You can also use charcoal. Not necessarily a pencil. So if you do start to incorporate vine charcoal or compressed charcoal pencils into this, if it's compressed charcoal pencils, make sure you are super confident with where you're putting it. If you want to try vine, again, the same warning as gray pastels. It can really start to take some life out, but in small doses, it's amazing. Take a look at Casey Klon's work with his figures. He's very Picasso, Degas-esque.
Could he be
A little more
teething?
Picasso. I think my pencil sharpener's tired. Okay.
No.
And remember too, if you don't know what something is in the photograph, don't try to paint it, just represent it with a light or a dark. That's all you need to do. It doesn't have to be a thing. It just has to be properly represented in light or dark.
Where's the junkyard? When and the girls are going?
So I'm going to set my pencil down for a little bit, and I want to go back into my pastels because I don't want to, again, I don't want to be carried away. This is a harder stick. This is one of those Generals. It's a really cheap brand. I'm going to put it back down too. I don't like the way it feels. Let's see, let's see. This is a new pastel, so it'll be a little bit nicer. Yeah. So now along, some of those ledges with my pencil, I can let's get some nice shadows in there in a couple of places. This is a little on the redder side of things, so probably not the last color I'll be using.
Okay. So, now what time, so there must be
And definitely look back, step back often, get up, stretch. The more information you put down, the more often you should stop
yeah, well, maybe.
and just get some distance from it because, I thought my line was straight. I'm looking at some of my buildings with my pencil on it, and I'm like, oh, that's really crooked. Uh, so I wouldn't have noticed had I not stepped back.
Girl, she told me.
Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm
No,
gonna
I
take
never got that.
a little bit of turquoise from the sky and just add a little bit of highlights on what would be maybe some of that trim from the windows, just to give it a little bit different color. There's a couple of bright pieces in here. It doesn't have to stay turquoise, but it can be a nice addition that calms some things and gives it a little bit of life. There is quite a bit of pink though too, if you're looking for it. Oh my gosh, I love this color and it's like crumbling in my hand. No, don't do it. I do actually need to buy some new pastels soon. I feel like my oceany colors are getting a little low. So go searching for some good sales. I'm gonna place with my pencil, I want to place a couple of these flags. Um, Actually, it's gonna look a little off, but I'm gonna go off of the shutters that I have, not necessarily the balcony that's there. It's gonna look a little high in comparison to that balcony, but two different buildings, so. And this other flag over here, whatever it's advertising, is kind of boring in color, so it might be blue. Might be something completely different, so I can have more color. So things that, you start to notice in the photograph the more you paint, there are power lines running across the street from building to building. And if you look closely, you can see little lights on them. Those are last minute decisions. I may or may not put them in there because they blend in with the buildings. If it were nighttime and they were lit up, that would be a whole different decision process. But they're not lit up. They're not really a part of the scene. They don't add anything to the scene, other than being terrified to put that line across the sky kind of a thing. So they'll probably get left out. I'm not sure right now, but I do see them. Just, keep that in mind. So this is another thing to consider. Like right here, right? I did not put people here, but there are people there. So, oh, all right, it's a little after 11. So my decision process can wait for a hot second. I still have a lot more to paint up here, but I have to think about that. And so do you guys. If you took people out like I did, just like taking an object out of the landscape, whether it's a tree or a fence or anything, we have to decide what lives behind it. So how does that look? Is it more orange building that comes down? Where does the sidewalk begin? I have a line representing where the sidewalk would be, so I can certainly bring the buildings all the way down to the sidewalk. Right now, all of my buildings stop at where the people's heads would technically be. So I have to think about that. In the meantime, I'm going to keep focusing on up here, because that's going to require final decision making with the number of people. But I don't want to get too far because of all the color choices. I need to be able to match what I'm doing, right? Okay, let's see. All right, get some red because it's fun. Pop some red in here. This is a very bright red, but it looks flat because I don't have a lot of color next to it. So I'll add some shadows, some deep burgundies with it. Grab some scarlety kind of colors here. That looks different. But they're in there for right now, so I can change it up as I go. And then I can decide at the last minute, whether or not I want to put in the writing. There's clearly writing on it. And I can put writing on it. But I could just use white charcoal to do that later. Worried about that right now. So inside the these front windows here, I put some like a grayed down turquoise right on top of that dark. It looks very gray on screen. I will take a picture of that before we're done. I'm gonna work for a few more minutes and then I'm gonna switch the camera and bring it a little closer so you guys can see a little bit closer as to exactly where I'm at before the end of class. So I'll work for another 5 minutes and then I'll refocus my camera so you can see a little closer. That is one thing with browns. It's always hard to get to, it's just they can flatten things out too, or just give the wrong, oh, that's bright. Give the wrong kind of impression. And I don't want to put, so, how I was saying before, putting a little bit of a turquoise from the sky, little accents. Again, just unless you didn't care where the city ended up looking like, you have to be a little careful with how much turquoise and things like that you add because those colors aren't there. Unless it's like a curtain or a decoration of some point or some kind. The buildings are not at all turquoise and they're not at all anything like that. So you can have those colors there, but just know that they're probably going to be curtain of some kind or something like that, just or a flag like we have. So one thing that I have a tendency to struggle with too is I'll grab like a new pastel to just get a little bit of something in there. And then I end up accidentally making my lines a little too stiff. So I have to force myself to take it out of my hand every now and again, because otherwise I'll get carried away and do the wrong thing. And my goal is to have just nice, soft, subtle markings that at a distance read together as something more. Guess along the lines of the Impressionists is my goal. Okay. Don't mind me for a minute. I'm just gonna switch and refocus my camera. So I have to turn it off so that I can refocus it. And then I'll come back on. Okay. So this is straight on now. It's a little bit closer to everything. So of course now I'm completely blocking myself. Hold on. Yeah. So right here is probably my favorite spot. This little section right here of all of those nice little beigey muted kind of colors. It's a completely opposite feel from across the street, but this feel is kind of what I'm going for. I need to work on this to achieve it just in this color palette. So this whole color palette's a little bit different because there's a little more color, a little more light across the street. But I like the simplicity that you can tell that those are buildings and what they're doing. I've left all of this blank for the people. This is where I'm talking about in between the people, just a little bit more information. Not a whole lot. It doesn't have to be tight. I don't have to go tight up against the people just yet. But I do need to keep those colors handy so I don't mess that up. So for next week, I won't touch any of the people. I may do a little more work on the buildings. I may. I'm not making any promises. If I do, um, I'll send out an image of it. But all in the lines of what I've already been doing. Just kind of trying to build depth and texture without going too crazy. These sets of shutters or darkness on the windows, I'm going to be lightening those in value. They're a little too dark for what's this whole section of buildings, because this is the one that turns a little bit. They read all as a very similar value with just a little bit of dark. This is quite a pop of dark. So I'm going to bring that into the light a little bit. And then I'm gonna keep working on that creamy yellow. Right now it's a little, I don't like the way the brown is looking next to it. The brown's too much, especially on camera. These brown lines here are way too heavy and way too much. So I'm gonna be working on that. So if I do work on the buildings, those are my two focuses. If I don't, I'll go into the people to start with next week and we'll go from there. I'm gonna switch cameras. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording.